Well, we're going to give this a shot. It's like so many of you, I'm stuck here at home. But I figure there's a lot of people home with their young kids who might want to give them a little something to watch. This is a book that I wrote a couple of years ago called Hank's First Fishing Trip. Basically it chronicles one of my first fishing trips with my granddad. I wrote this in dedication to my grandson Camden, so it's pretty special to me. The illustrator is Paul Hart, a gentleman I've never actually met, but when I saw Paul's illustrations to my story, I knew he had captured it perfectly. So thank you, Paul. Hank's first fishing trip. Hank barely got any sleep all night because he was so excited. The next morning was Saturday, and it was also his 6th birthday, and his grandpa was going to take him fishing for the very first time. Bzzz went Hank's alarm right after 5 a.m., and it was still dark outside. Hank had never been up this early, but Grandpa always said you gotta get up early to catch the big ones. Hank hopped right out of bed and finished getting ready to go. He had even slept in his clothes just to save some time. From the kitchen, Hank could smell one of his favorite things in the world, bacon cooking. "Morning, smells good, Mom," Hank said. "Good morning to you too," she replied, "and happy birthday, Hank." Right then, the back door opened and in walked Grandpa with a hearty "Good morning. Anyone here ready to go fishing?" "I'm ready," Hank said excitedly. "Before anyone goes fishing, sit down and eat breakfast," ordered Mom. Hank barely tasted his breakfast because he ate it so fast. Grandpa finished his cup of coffee and Hank asked, "Can we go fishing now?" "You bet," said Grandpa. "It's going to be a great day for fishing." Hank always loved the smell of Grandpa's truck. It smelled like fresh sawdust from Grandpa's woodworking shop and strong coffee. Those aromas always seemed to follow him. In the back of his truck were a couple of fishing rods, an old tackle box, a cooler, and a fishing net. Hank sure hoped they'd get to use that net today. Hank had heard Grandpa talk many times about his fishing trips and secret fishing spots, and he had hoped that they were on their way to a good spot today. "Where are we going fishing, Grandpa?" "The old bridge on Spring Creek. The white bass are in their spawning run right now." Hank was really excited now. He knew that from hearing Grandpa's fishing stories that meant there would be a lot of fish swimming up the river to where they'd lay their eggs, meaning they would have lots of fish to catch. The truck pulled onto a dirt road, and Hank couldn't help but notice the butterflies in his stomach as they approached the river, just below the old stone bridge. "Good," Grandpa said. "Looks like we've got this honey hole all to ourselves today." Hank climbed out of the truck. Grandpa gathered up the fishing gear. "Oh yeah," Grandpa said with excitement in his voice. "Isn't it your birthday today, Hank?" Hank answered, "It sure is. And this fishing trip is the best present ever." "Well then," said Grandpa, "where does this present rank?" Right then, Grandpa reached under an old blanket in the back of the truck and pulled out a shiny new fishing rod and reel. "Is that for me, Grandpa?" Hank asked. "It sure is. All spooled up with new line and ready to catch the big ones," Grandpa answered. After a quick lesson from Grandpa on how to use his new rod and reel, it was time to get down to some serious fishing. "What lure are we using today, Grandpa?" Hank asked. "I think a spinner would do the trick nicely today." Grandpa rummaged through his tackle box full of all kinds of lures and fishing tackle. "There it is!" Grandpa exclaimed as if he had found buried treasure. "This old spinner has caught a lot of fish for me over the years." The spinner had a yellow body with black polka dots, a shiny silver blade, and white feathers tied to a small treble hook on the back. "To the fish, this will look like a small minnow that they want to eat." Hank couldn't wait to use it. Grandpa tied the spinner securely to Hank's line and carefully demonstrated the right knot to use. Hank was excited to learn everything there was about fishing, and he tried to listen, but all he could think of was casting that lure into the river and catching his first fish. "One more thing, Hank, before we get started fishing." Grandpa's voice was more serious now than usual. It's important to always be safe when fishing. I know you're a big boy now, and you've been working on learning how to swim, but let's be extra safe and put this life jacket on you. That was fine with Hank as long as he could start fishing. Now you're ready, said Grandpa. The two headed down the riverbank with rods and reels in hand. These fish like to hang just out of the current flow, so cast your lure behind where the bridge enters the water. That's a good spot for the fish to be, instructed Grandpa. Hank reared back and made his first cast into the river. It didn't go as far as he had hoped, but Grandpa explained he would get better with more practice. By the third time, Hank cast like a pro. Then it happened. Halfway through the retrieve, Hank felt a jerk on his line. "Set the hook," Grandpa yelled, and Hank pulled back on the rod. "I got one," Hank shouted, and the battle was on. Hank reeled, the fish pulled, and Grandpa barked out instructions. "Keep your rod tip up. Don't horse him. You've got a dandy there." Hank was excited. This was every bit the thrill he had hoped it would be. As the fish came splashing to the surface near the shore, Grandpa reached out with the landing net, slipped it under the fish, and lifted it out of the water. "That's a beauty, Hank." Grandpa smiled broadly. Hank gushed with excitement. He caught his first fish, and it was magnificent. A white bass, shimmering with silver and white scales and flopping in the net. Hank could not remember ever feeling this proud of himself. "It's your fish, Hank. What should we do with it?" Hank thought for a minute. "Can we keep it?" "We can, with a few more like it. We'll have Grandma cook us up a fine fish dinner." "That sounds great to me," Hank said. "Sounds like a good plan," said Grandpa, "but let's get a picture of you with your first fish and then we can get back to fishing." Hank and his grandpa fished for a while longer. Each caught more fish. Some of the fish they kept, but most they let go. Grandpa explained to Hank that it was important to release most of the fish so there would always be fish to catch next time. Hank liked that idea because he wanted to do a lot more fishing in the future. On the way home, Hank couldn't help reliving his first catch over and over again in his head. It was such a wonderful memory, and he knew it would stay with him forever. Hank turned to his grandpa and said, "Thank you, Grandpa, for a wonderful birthday. I'll never forget it." Grandpa just smiled. "Neither will I, Hank. Neither will I." The end. Until next time.